Take our seats, we can get on with tonight's business. It is January 9th, 2024. We are the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council. Noah, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Jeremoff? Here. Councilmember Ferlito? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Here.
Mayor Potter?
Here.
All are present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well done. Well done. All right. First item is public appearances. It's an opportunity for anybody to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. 3-minute limitation on the testimony. If you state your name for the record, I'd appreciate it, although it's not mandatory. Counselor, would you read the new caveat?
Certainly. So under the Brown Act, public comment for matters on the agenda must relate to that agenda item, and public comments for matters not on the agenda must relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of this legislative body. Hateful, violent, and threatening speech is impermissible public comment as it disrupts the conduct of the public meeting and is not consistent with the requirements of the Brown Act. This is a warning that if a member of the public attending this meeting remotely violates the Brown Act by failing to comply with these requirements of the Brown Act, then that speaker will be muted.
Thank you. That noted, is there anybody in the public wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, Mayor Potter, members of the council. My name's Mark Stillwell. Family owns Trademans Carmel and former Carmel Lodge. I just wanted to give a shout out to this. I don't wish on anybody trying to renovate an old hotel in Carmel-by-the-Sea or any jurisdiction, but so it's been a 2-year slog. We're getting close, and I wanted to give a shout out to staff, however, because they have made the process doable and workable, and we're very close. And I just, from the planning staff, building staff, public works, your forestry department, everybody has been terrific and helpful, and we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We hope to be open in March. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. You will not be muted tonight. Next speaker. Gerard, come forward.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, staff, council members. My name is Gerard Rose. I live I have a home at 7th and Lincoln. First of all, I wanted to wish Bobby a happy birthday. He's the big 6-0, and he doesn't look it. And his lovely mother is here. So here's a shout out to her. And also, I've been asked by a number of city members to please give an update on our flock ordinance. That's the ordinance that allows us to go around and take photographs of people as they enter the city. After I was on the council, the chief, thank God he's back, we did some studies, and we seemed to think it was a good idea. And Chip Rarig early last year did a summary of what the flock project was all about. The project seemed like a good idea, but other people have been asking me to please make some comments about privacy and the right of privacy. And the chief can fill you in more on the steps that we've taken to protect privacy, but it's still a concern. And what a lot of people don't know is that 50 years ago, when I was a young pup, well, not that young, and I was in law school, the state of California became the first state in the United States to adopt a right of privacy as a constitutional provision. And so if you look at our Constitution of the state of California, it provides in part that citizens of this state and people residing here are all entitled to a fundamental right of privacy. And we were the first state to do it in the United States. So it's a serious provision. It's still enforced by the courts. There are a lot of decisions now that talk about what cities can and cannot do to protect privacy. But now that we've had the flock program in effect now for about a year, I think it would be an appropriate time for the chief and/or Chip or their designee to talk about just how the program has worked out and what kind of results we've had. Have there been any complaints about privacy? And I know I've only got a minute, but I think the chief would do a good job of explaining the various protections that the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea has adopted in order to protect our privacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerard. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening. My name is Marshall Fulbright. I'm the superintendent president of Monterey Peninsula College, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. John Cannoli, who is the vice president of academic affairs. I'm here to invite the city council and all the community to a series of upcoming events that we have planned for Monterey Peninsula College. These events are planned to elicit or solicit input from the community for critical planning activities that we have in order to shape the MPC in its future. First, we have our mission, vision, and values. We're going to be reviewing and visiting our college's mission statement, as well as establishing new visions and values statement as well. This is an important part of our commitment to continuous improvement and to ensure that we remain focused for our students and the communities for which we serve. This work will also set the stage for upcoming events to develop our new educational master plan. To ensure that our mission, vision, values align with the community needs. We are hosting 3 community events and sessions in early February I'm here to invite you to participate and share your thoughts in this process. The sessions will be the same, so you can pick whichever one you'd like to attend. First is on Friday, February 2nd, 12 to 1:30 p.m. on the Monterey campus, also via Zoom. The second is Tuesday, February 6th, 3 to 4:30 p.m. on the Monterey campus. And the third is Wednesday, February 7th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Marina Education Center in Marina. And as we talk about Marina, we are excited to share that we are currently planning for significant expansion and change at our Marina Ed Center. In November 2020, we thank you for all the voters that supported a $230 million bond measure to facilitate technology and improvements of all of our 3 campuses. And among those projects, the Marina Ed Center is one of them, and this will allow us to transform that center literally to be a go-to destination and a part of our overall educational training in this entire region. Recognizing that healthcare and hospitality and tourism are 2 of our region's top industries, we are excited to consider the role that the Marina Ed Center will play in supporting and expanding those career paths in this region. In addition to the numerous academic programs and career opportunities that we have, the Marina Ed Center expansion will feature and complement our student services, programs and support our overall student success, financial aid, and tutoring services there as well. To ensure that Marina Ed Center plan aligns with our community needs as well, we're hosting 3 more community sessions separate from the first 3 that will focus on the expansion of that center. And again, I'd like to invite you to attend those as well. So Friday, February 21st from 2 to 3:30 p.m. at the Marina Ed Center. Tuesday, February 23rd from 3 to 4:30 p.m. on the Monterey campus. And Wednesday, February 27th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Marina Ed Center. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Go Lobos.
Next speaker.
Hello, it's Craig Rose. I'm fairly new to town, 7 months, and these meetings remind me a lot about what I missed about going to church. You find out a lot about the city, you find out what's real, what's not. This simulation up here isn't real, but what's real is the paper sometimes writes the right stories. There was an article about a woman named Teresa, and I didn't live here during the pandemic. And I didn't know when I got hit in the face by Chip if he was a good guy or a bad guy. And so I heard about this lady named Teresa because I come to these meetings, and I heard last month just an outpouring of support for her case. I also heard that she was defending herself against Chip, and I thought it's interesting how Chip's on the president, or he's on the board of Visit Carmel. He's got 2 lawsuits against him, and one was, you could just watch this video, how an unelected politician stole a beach from God's children. And it's put up by one of our own here in Carmel, a wonderful lady who I just met. I knew it must be her from just her presence, her aura of just, she's not out to get anyone. She was just out to go on the beach that she was invited to, that you guys overstood your power and you shut it. I found out that she's representing herself, and sometimes like when you get hit and then you don't have a defense and you don't have the money, and then you get snowballed by a guy named Jonathan Redford, who is representing the city of Carmel right now. He's a lawyer out of Los Angeles, and for about 2 years, he's just stonewalled Teresa because she's not represented by a lawyer. But why should she be for just going to the beach and now being arrested? Guys, I didn't come here to start a fight. I wanted to build some bridges. There's some major problems going on in this town. The artists, we can't shut down for concrete walls. We can't turn our backs on the people that got you your seat here. There's a renaissance happening in Carmel, okay? It's going to start, Chip, by you owning some of this. Owning it. We stand for somebody like Teresa, and you guys never shut the beach. The beach is not yours. The beach is not yours.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Last call in the house here. Go to Zoom World. Nova?
Nancy, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. I didn't want to freeze in the Carmel chambers like last night, so I apologize for not being there. I wanted to express my sincere thanks to the teams that put together last Saturday's Carmel Prepares event, city activities, police, fire, CERT, and the Peace of Mind preparedness work that was very informative for the town to be on top of and in advance of any possible impact by storms coming up this winter or any of the fires that come out in the summertime, late summertime and fall. So thank you very much. It was a great session, standing room only almost, and look forward to having that as a repeat session to keep people plugged into what they need to do. Thanks so much for everything that was put together to make that happen.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Yes. Catherine, go ahead.
Catherine?
Hi. Yeah. I just wanted to speak on the issue of delegating authority to non-elected, unelected, unaccountable employees. It's actually an unlawful act. It's against the doctrine of non-delegation. And that doctrine is rooted in the principle of separation of powers that underlines the tripartite system of government that we have. Per court case Chavez-Zepeda versus Superior Court, it says the legislative branch of government, although it's charged with the formulation of policy, properly may delegate some quasi-legislative or rulemaking authority to administrative agencies, but there has to be suitable safeguards, meaning the limits of these types of things must be within constitutional provisions. The non-delegation doctrine serves to assure that truly fundamental issues will be resolved by the elected body, and that a grant of authority is accompanied by safeguards adequate to prevent abuse. When you give a city manager who is not an elected public servant the ability to suspend civil liberties and use what amounts to a standing army against the people of Carmel, you have delegated improperly and unlawfully delegated your authority, and you could be held personally liable for damages associated with that. So if the city council needs to go and re-educate itself on what your role is when you're given this office by your voters, you probably should do that, because you're exposing yourself to having civil asset forfeiture, meaning you lose your personal property because you've gone out and you've created harm against the people that you're supposed to be serving. Another quote here is that this pertains to the Board of Supervisors, but also goes to city council members. The Board of Supervisors exercises the county's powers except as is otherwise specifically limited in the Constitution, the state laws, or a county charter. That actually pertains to you guys. So you can't tell your city manager that he can go and have unfettered ability to tell people that they can't sunbathe. I mean, the people of Carmel should be completely outraged at this situation and should be recalling all of you and firing the city manager and firing Tomasi, the chief of police, who has perpetrated a ridiculous and damaging act upon the people of Carmel. If I paid as much
Catherine, your time
money.
is up. I'm sorry, your time is up. Is there
Next
anybody
we
else wishing to speak
have
tonight?
Chris Cav.
Chris?
Am I unmuted now?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks. I spoke on December 5th as well, and I thank you for allowing public comment. And the observance I'm having too is that quite a few people on December 5th spoke like the last speaker and, you know, about the thing that was done at the beach that wasn't correct. And I spoke about that as well in a kind and peaceful way. I see that my name is recorded in the December 5th minutes, but there is absolutely nothing said of what the public speakers say. Is that, I'm curious if that's normal city council behavior, that you allow people to speak, but then you don't write anything into the minutes. Is there anything that can be, you know, written, said for the record? You know, for the record, I would like that public comments would be recorded for the record so that when you look at it in the minutes and we can see them there. But I don't know how the city council does that. Maybe you can explain. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Joe, go ahead.
Hi, Joe Todd speaking. Happy New Year to everyone now. The reason I'm speaking tonight is that I really want to thank the people who came to the post office December 22nd. We had a wonderful time. Some people were there as just spectators. Some were there to sing. And a special thanks, though, to Kip Whitpin of Whitpin Antiques. He brought his antique, let's see, what's that called? A mandolin, sorry. He had an antique mandolin that he shared with us, but he had to leave because he had to open the shop at 11. And then we had another person who, Hans Lieberman, you probably know him. He brought his antique accordion. Sorry. So I just, again, wanted to thank everyone for coming out. It was Ken White ringing the bell for the Salvation Army, and he asked me to make the arrangements for the music. So we had a wonderful time, and thank you, and hope to see you next year.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
There are no other hands raised.
All right, last call. All right, we'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council, and we got the Carmel High School report. Alexander, I believe you're speaking. Welcome.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Frederick. I'm from the class of 2025 at Carmel High, and I'm here to tell you all that we've just started our second semester, winter break has ended, and our boys basketball team has started super strong this year. They're 12-1, they have another game tonight against Salinas, and this will be the last semester for the class of 2024, so that would be, you know, Harper, of course, who's been here several times. Our second semester club fair will be this week as well. It'll help introduce students to clubs that were maybe created this year after the first semester club fair, or just give them another opportunity to look into clubs that they might be interested in. The chess club, other clubs like that. Mock Trial is hosting their annual invitational tournament this weekend, and the winter formal is coming up January 20th. There's also our annual music mattress sale on the 21st in the Carmel gym. And the visual and performing arts show is going to be Wednesday the 24th in the evening. Next year, the counselors have already started talking to students about plans for electives and just their schedules in general. And rehearsals for our spring musical, Mean Girls, are beginning right now. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your report.
Alex, excuse me, Alex. Where is the mock trial tournament?
The mock trial tournament is going to be at Carmel.
At Carmel High?
Carmel Invitational, yeah.
What day?
It should be this weekend.
Do you know if Saturday or Sunday? Or
I
both
imagine
days?
it's both days.
Both days?
Yeah, they're a hard-working group of people.
All right. Hey, could you do me a favor and tell Dylan Hines congratulations on getting his license today?
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Appreciate the report, Alex. Okay, so now the next item is appointment of Mayor Pro Tem Bobby Richards. I would like to nominate again. Bobby, you've done a good job in the past. Don't screw up. I appreciate it. Okay. Nominate Bobby Richards. Do I have a second?
Oh, sure, I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, call the roll.
Okay. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All righty, that brings us into a consent calendar. There's 12 items on the consent calendar. I'm sorry, I forgot the administrative report. We got Chip, what do you got?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. My comments are profound. I can't even get the words out. Profound amount of thanks. 8 years ago, I hired someone who became our assistant city administrator, Maxine Gullo, and she has been so dedicated to our enterprise, so dedicated to the villagers. You will see her out during storm events, during tree events, during all kinds of emergency operations. She has been the de facto department head for our administration department for that duration. She's close with the people you see in the gallery tonight. Ashley Wright, our library and community activities director, Brandon Swanson, Bob Harari, and Chief Tomasi. And one of the reasons that Chief came back was because Maxine was still here. She hired Emily Garay, who's working on a variety of projects. She hired Jane Hogan, who does our finances expertly, and a whole litany of other people. And she's, again, been very steadfast and dedicated, not just to the village, but to the mission of the council. And we recently learned that Maxine is leaving us. She'll be leaving for different pastures. I wouldn't say greener pastures, nothing greener than Carmel. And I will profoundly miss her, and we owe her a great debt of gratitude for her work here. So council, please join me in thanking Maxine for her almost 8 years of service, and wish her fair winds and following seas.
Yeah. Maxine, I'm very sincere. You will be missed, honestly. Well done. All right, council, any more comments for council members?
Yes. Oh, were you going to do attorney comments first?
Okay, you want to do attorney comments?
Yeah, I'd like to report that I have no report from the closed session.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. All right, council members.
Yes, I had the pleasure of attending the emergency preparedness workshop this weekend, and it was well done. It was mindful of our time, but there was so much information imparted about what to do and where to get information that I just wanted to commend Ashley and Chief Tomasi and also Scott Smythe and Wanda Vollmer. It was a really good event, and I look forward to another one in the future, and I would urge all of you, when you can, to attend one of these. I think the future event will be recorded, as I understand, but the information is on our website, and you can get a lot of information what to do during storms or if we have other emergencies throughout the town. So thank you very much.
And I just comment too that there was a large turnout of the public. Almost 100 people. That's pretty impressive for first time. It's very impressive. Thank you. Okay, Alessandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say a few words in memory of resident Janice Bradner, who passed away in late December after several months of illness and declining health. Many of you knew Janice through her work as Carmel Residents Association board member, her participation with Carmel Preservation Association and Design Tradition meetings, and her active involvement as a volunteer in the downtown cleanup, planting, and beautification of our village. She made it her mission to rid the streets of Carmel of cigarette butts and raised awareness of the issue. Janice loved Carmel and found so many ways to show it and to defend Carmel's heritage. She was spirited, passionate, and strong-willed, yet kind and thoughtful. Janice always concluded all of her emails with the inspirational statement from Margaret Mead, quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has," end quote. She will be missed.
Very nicely done. Thank you, Alessandra. Anybody else?
Well, I'll just, yeah, as George said, I did have a big birthday a couple weeks ago, and I celebrated it in a little town in Bavaria, but I wanted to reach out to the citizens here and say thanks a lot for reaching out to me and the good wishes, and I appreciate that very much.
Most is said. Okay. All right, why don't we move on then to the consent calendar. There's 12 items on consent. I'd like to pull number 5 just for clarification. Alessandra?
I'd like to pull number 11, please.
11. All right, is there anybody else? Council? Anybody in the public wish to pull an item? Mr. Byrne, please come forward. State what reason why. Yep.
Number 2 and 3.
2 and 3. Okay.
Number 12.
12. All righty. Is that noted? Does anybody else in council? Okay, should we go ahead and have a motion to approve the balance then?
I'll make the motion that we move on consent agenda items number 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
No. We pulled
11
we
was
pulled 11.
Oh, sorry. Okay, try again. 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Any public comment? All right, we'll go ahead and pick up the roll,
Okay.
please.
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
All right.
Motion carries.
All right, well, let's see. So we've got numbers 2 and 3 pulled. Okay, pull those. Pull those. Dale.
I promise to be quick. Dale Byrne, speaking as a resident. So first, with number 2, which is the paint job for the Sunset Center and Harrison Library. I'm not expecting an answer again, but I was wondering why we waited decades, because it's clearly stated that we waited decades if we knew that it had lead paint. It's nice that it's being
Mr. Byrne,
rectified.
number 2 is the monthly reports. Number 3 is the check register.
Yeah.
Is
Did
this
you
the
mean
consent
number-
agenda?
Pardon me?
Am I in the wrong meeting?
No.
The first one's a monthly report, and the other one's a check register.
The library is number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5's the one I...
You added 2 and 3.
Human error. Okay. So we've already pulled number
We have
5.
to fix it, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We can
I
go to number 5.
apologize
So we can go to number
profusely.
5 now, though.
Okay, can we do 5?
Yeah.
You're going to have to clean up your voting in a second, but you'll clean up everything in the end. So why did we wait decades when we knew the lead paint was there, or if we did, it didn't really say. Second, I'm glad that there was one company that was willing to do the work, because there was quite a litany of explanations for the bidding process on this over the last several months. And I like round numbers, and those numbers were very round, $100,000 times 2 for the library. I like those numbers. Third, there's a interesting comment in there that we're painting the library partly because it will elicit donations for the library master plan process. It doesn't really give any details about that. And again, we're not going to get answers on that tonight, but in the future, it would be interesting to see what the plan is for that. I happened to find, I thought, a design for the master plan that was done a while ago, even had underground parking. It was fairly complex. Is this replacing that one? And who's going to pay for that master plan? Is it going to be the donations that are referenced in here? And then who's going to pay for the actual part? That's a future project that I'm sure we'll discuss, but I'm interested to find that out. Finally, and I don't know if this is a crazy idea, it can never be done,
But as I said last night, the Library Foundation is an incredible organization, probably the most amazing one we've ever had. Why don't we just give them the building so we don't have to go through all this grief and they don't have to go through bureaucratic processes to get their work done, including the master plan, including the final design and executing it in the end. And again, I don't know if that's even possible. I'm just putting it out in the universe. And that's it for that. You want me to stay here for the next one?
I'd actually pulled this item myself for clarification. So Ashley, could you come up here?
Absolutely. Mayor and Council, thank you for letting me come up to speak to this item this evening. So I want to clarify, and the mayor's aware of this as well, that this is just for the exterior. We're just going to be painting the exterior of the building. This is overdue. We were actually looking at tackling this before the pandemic hit. And it, of course, got derailed by the pandemic. So here we are. Of importance with the exterior painting are the eaves underneath the roof line. We don't want any deterioration there, and with the storms we've been having, this will be a good preventative measure. In addition, with the master plan project we've been talking about, we have no intention of touching the exterior of the building at all. We're not expanding. We all know, we've seen the plans from many years past where that hasn't worked, and we've expanded that building as much as it's been expanded. But the exterior painting is critical. To speak to some of Mr. Burns' points, the reason why the painting at the Harrison Library has taken some time is, as you all well know, our capital budget isn't what it was in the early 2000s. We have still catching up on deferred maintenance. For many of our city facilities, Measure D and Measure C have made that possible, and we're very grateful that the exterior, the painting of the library will be happening. We're still working on our master plan project to determine renovations for both library facilities. We're taking our time with that. This is, both two very important buildings in our village. Harrison Library is historic, and so we're being very thoughtful in looking at those projects from all of the angles, which is why I don't yet have anything to report out to all of you. But again, the exterior is very important. I think a few other things Mr. Byrd mentioned about, the foundation taking over the management of the building. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate, and it's certainly not the agreement that the city has with the Board of Trustees. These are city facilities. The library is a city department. That is very important. And the Carmel Public Library Foundation's mission for 34 years has been to raise funds to keep the library open, relevant, and thriving. And that's including raising funds for technology and equipment and books and all of those things that help make our library a great space. So if there's any further questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I'm looking forward to seeing
questions for Ashley?
The outside of the building painted.
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you. All right, so now we got clarification on 1, 2, and 3, which was a false poll, and then we got 5 clarifications. Do we have a motion to move those items?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve items 2, 3, and 5.
Second.
Second. Can we get a roll call, Melba?
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Alessandra, I believe you pulled item number 11.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the item to provide more money to EMC Planning Group. We're adding another $92,000. The contract is now close to $400,000. It's $371,000. EMC Planning Group is the one that's doing the housing element report, and so this money is going to comply for the state mandates on housing, and it's another example of an unfunded mandate by the state. Even if most of the $400,000 was grant money, it's still somebody's taxpayer money, and we've been forced to spend on something that is ultimately going to be detrimental in the long run, as it represents a loss of local control in planning, zoning, density, and design. The state has been heavy-handed, top-down, and it's one-size-fits-all mandates. Legislators are resisting. The latest news that I've heard is San Francisco 2 Board of Supervisors are meeting with their city attorney to consider possibly suing the state over these housing mandates.
Thank you. With that clarification, then, do you want to move the item?
I'll make a motion to approve item 11.
I'll second it.
Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item? Dale?
Could I speak on, you sort of went through the whole library thing.
No, we're done with the library.
I know you're done with the library, but you voted to paint the inside and the outside, and Ashley said they were only going to paint the outside. So you just voted something that she said they weren't going to do. I just wanted to bring that up.
So the contract was negotiated for the interior and the exterior painting at the time. We got the bids for both of those things. As you approved it, it includes that. It doesn't mean that we'll move forward with interior painting. We'll do a change order so that it's exterior only. Does that make sense?
That's what I thought.
It's bundled together, but we'll make that change, and we can do that through the change order process at a staff level.
I understand.
Rather than renegotiate, stop, pull this item, come back to council and delay all of the plans that we're starting to make in terms of nailing down dates for not only the library, but the Sunset Center painting as well.
Right, okay, thank you for the clarification. All right, that's what I thought. Okay, so now we will then move on to the
No,
final.
we have to finish.
Yeah, we had a motion in a second. Hold on.
Are we allowed to have public comment on that? This is a major issue. If you're hearing, this is $392,000 to paint.
It's already been voted.
This is what he's bringing up, and so she should come back with just the exterior. That's less the money, not $392,000. You guys voted. Dale's right of what he just said. You guys crossed over it, and now she wants it approved for this full budget. That's a fat budget. You should just approve what you've just approved, the outside. So that should be less than half of that, and that's a high number. We'll talk about it when we get to 12. You've had a lot of money in the budget the first month of the year, so let's slow down here. This is important.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Mayor, can I just get some clarification? Alessandra, so are you saying that we shouldn't put this $92,000 towards the MC and finish the project?
I'm just pointing out that it's another example of an unfunded state mandate. Every city in California is being forced by the state to do this and to end up making these plans that ultimately, for our community, architecturally, this is going to be detrimental to us.
No, I think we can agree with that, but I'm just wondering if you're saying that we shouldn't do it.
No.
Well, I think we're stuck doing it,
Okay.
but I'm making a point here.
Expressing frustration, which I think we all
Yes.
share.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to move to number 11.
Yes. Yeah, I made the motion and
Yeah, thank you.
Karen seconded it.
Okay. All right, all those in favor? No, go ahead. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Jermall?
No.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.
You would have gotten 2 more no's.
All right, let's move on then to item number 12. Mr. Rose, you pull this item.
Yeah, this just seems like a giant game to you guys. You're just voting no for fun. You guys are just laughing at. These people really care. So issue 12 here. There's a professional service agreement with Visit Carmel. I know we want to say they're a nonprofit. They're a private charity. That man right there runs a nonprofit. He's not in it for the money. Carmel cares. He doesn't have a 10-year contract with the city, and yet I see this man cleaning up trash every day driving around. It's interesting when you go down and look at these professional agreements and this money here. Chip is on the board of directors for Visit Carmel, and he's the one with the authority to grant them a 10-year professional service agreement. Man, I've been contracted work before, and it's great to get a year contract. To get a 10-year contract for both the restaurant and the other part of the city. I don't know. Who's getting paid here? When I paint a building for $392 and I get this approved and passed through, you guys, we see the game. This gig is up.
These were your comments, sir.
I'll take my full 3 minutes and just let this sit. Time is up here, and it's time to change. Issue 12 here. There's an issue here. Chip's on the board for Visit Carmel. He's not a good look for the city. We're giving this company more money. They've got a great company in Napa, and they do great jobs, but 10 years? 10 years to just do their job, Mayor? You don't get 10 years. You get 2. Give them 2 years. Don't overpay on a contract for paint when we're not going to finish the job. Don't just give your friends jobs that give you a little. This can't be this club. We're done with these country clubs. Okay? Let's do the right thing here. And Dale for mayor.
All right. Yeah, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, so just for clarification, Visit Carmel is what's known as a destination marketing organization, and destination marketing organizations assesses. They self-tax. So in this case, it's the restaurants who voted themselves to assess their patrons 25 cents on a $100 ticket. So if you go and you have dinner somewhere at one of our 60 whatever restaurants, and it's a $100 bill, it's $100.25. And Visit Carmel uses that money to highlight the attributes, our village attributes for the restaurants. And they feature different restaurants, and they do marketing and public relations for the restaurants. So the only role the city has is we collect the money, and then we take the money, we distribute the money back to Visit Carmel, with the exception of the amount of money it takes us, our staff, to collect that money. So we make $5,000 a year or something like that, and the rest of the money goes back to the DMO. The DMO board is made up of restaurateurs, and on the hospitality side and the hotel side, of hospitality or hotel owners or managers, with the exception of RC, and I sit on that board on behalf of the City Council. So again, the item before you is for the Carmel Restaurant Improvement District, which is a DMO, to highlight and celebrate the restaurant attributes of the village itself, not outside our boundaries, just the village.
So the $240,000 that's mentioned in the staff report, that's $240,000 that the city collects from the restaurants, correct?
We collect it on behalf of the restaurants, and we just redistribute it to their marketing organization.
We collect $5,595, 2%, to cover our expenses in acting as a pass-through organization from the restaurants to Visit Carmel.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it's also important to note, Chip, that the reason why Chip sits on that board is because the task of Visit Carmel and CRID and HID is to get people to restaurants and get people to spend the night. With Chip sitting on the board, he represents the other businesses in town, like the art galleries, like the retail shops, like the other stores that aren't either hotels or restaurants. And so that's why Chip sits on that board.
Okay, with that clarification, is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Why I said that.
Do you want Amy to speak to it?
Yeah.
So,
Hi, Amy Herzog, Executive Director for Visit Carmel. Just a couple, thank you for explaining that. A couple other points of clarification. The 10-year contract is that length because it's commensurate to the length of the term that was renewed. But once a year, if the restaurants wanted to disband the RID, or if for some other reason it was disbanded, then that contract would also come to an end. It's just commensurate with that length. The funds that the restaurants collect on self-assessment and then are provided to Visit Carmel are actually, the recommendations for how those are to be used for marketing are done by a separate restaurant marketing committee as well. So the restaurants themselves are about 8 different restaurateurs on that committee that come together with us on meetings every other month where we decide how to market the restaurants in the best way possible to meet the needs of all the restaurants in the community, and then those recommendations are brought back to the Visit Carmel board. So just a little more insight on how all that works.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. All right, that noted. We're going to bring it back. Can we have a motion, please?
I make the motion to approve number 12.
Second.
Motion to second. Any other discussion by council? Nova, could you call a roll?
Councilmember Barron?
yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on to orders of business. First item is consideration of a philosophy regarding ticket events held in the public right-of-way during Car Week. Ashley, right again. Why would we want that?
Mayor and Council, thank you again for letting me speak this evening. It's a little early, but this is a Car Week event. I'll have a formal Car Week event update for you at the March regular meeting. So this isn't intended to be that with regards to what we're expecting for summer of 2024. This is meant to, hopefully you will provide me with some direction regarding Car Week events as we apply the special event permitting process. So as you all know, Car Week is, a little over a week and a half at this point, and it's a combination of both public and private events every August, the second week of every August. Here in Carmel, pre-pandemic, we had Concours on the Avenue on Tuesdays, Prancing Ponies on Wednesdays, and then the Pebble Beach Tour de Elegance would come through on Thursdays. As of 2023, we had smaller events. The Accurate in the Park, which was a holdover from the Concours on the Avenue event. A new event, the Concours for a Cause. Prancing Ponies was back, but on Thursday instead. And then Ferrari Owners Club was a new event. These were all much smaller in nature, of course, than the Tour de Elegance event and the Concours on the Avenue. Both beloved events, and we are working towards building something to that scale, but it's going to take a few years at least for us to get there. But I've heard the community. I know that the will is there. And when I speak with event organizers, they understand that as well. I want to talk about ticketed events here in Carmel-by-the-Sea. So the events that I organize and run out of the Community Activities Department, those are all free and open to the public. So I'm talking about the Halloween parade, the pumpkin roll, tree lighting, all of those. There's no tickets required. Anybody can come and join us for those events. With regards to other event organizers coming in and having events here in Carmel-by-the-Sea, there are two events that are ticketed events that occur on public property, and those are the Monterey County Vintners Winemaker Celebration, and that is a nonprofit group, and then the annual Carmel Art Festival, which is also a nonprofit group. They have a VIP lounge the first night of the festival, and that runs one of the weekends in May, and it's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The rest of the event's open to the public, but that Friday night VIP lounge is closed. Those are ticketed for two reasons. Mostly, it's for the ABC regulations. So those are events featuring alcohol. So they need to be fenced off. There need to be controlled measures for people in and out of those. We were just discussing, the implications of alcohol at events last night. They're also a fundraiser for their 501c3 nonprofit organizations. That's the purpose those serve. These tickets can be purchased by anyone 21 and older, so they're open for the public to purchase those. And I want to point out, when we talk about Car Week events and we talk about Concours on the Avenue or the Tour de Elegance as it was in town, those are very large events. Those encompassed all of our downtown. The events that I'm talking about here with the Vintners and the Art Festival, those are very small. The Art Festival VIP Lounge is one part of the park, and the Vintners is just one city block. So something to keep in mind as we progress through this discussion. So what I'm hoping for from the council this evening is some philosophy around ticketed events specific to Car Week, just Car Week alone, because Car Week, I think we can all acknowledge, is special. It is complex. It is busy. It is, there's a lot happening. I want to return to this idea of the two different kinds of Car Week events. So we do have on the peninsula, broader peninsula, not in Carmel-by-the-Sea, private or ticketed events. And those are Concours d'Elegance at Pebble Beach. They're the auction events at, such as Bonhams, Meekums, anything happening out at Quail Lodge. So those are the bigger events that, I can't just walk into. I'm not, we're not just wandering in from the Valley Road seeing what's going on. You need to have a ticket to be a part of those events. Conversely, you will see public events that are free and open to everybody, and those are usually held and permitted by our cities. So I'm talking about the events that we've had here in Carmel-by-the-Sea year over year, Concours on the Avenue, Prancing Ponies, smaller events that we had last year, but also our neighbors with the Concours de Le Mans, the Exotics on Broadway, the little car show in Pacific Grove. Those give everybody a chance to participate in Car Week one way or another, whether you're a car aficionado that actually does have tickets to an event, or if you're a resident that just wants to come out and see what the hullabaloo is about and enjoy some of these cars that you wouldn't otherwise maybe be able to afford to see. But also it's a balance between, I get to see these extraordinary things and it took me longer to get to the grocery store, but that made it somewhat worthwhile. Some of these cars are, pieces of art in and of themselves. So that's, these two different kinds of Car Week events that we're looking at. I want to talk about ticketed events. I do have a permit application in for this year, and this is what kind of sparked this. Wanting to do a ticketed event in our downtown area, similar to the footprint of Concord on the Avenue, which is from Junipero all the way down to Monteverde, and then the side streets out to 6th and 7th, so a large footprint. This isn't the first time this has come up for the Community Activities Department. Prior to his unfortunate passing, Mr. Friedman and I were talking about it. He'd been talking about it for a number of years. And during 2021, the state had put a number of regulations in place, if you will remember, with regards to large-scale special events that required checkpoints for us to hand out masks, to do COVID testing, to do all of those types of things to make sure our event was as safe as possible. And the Friedmans did execute this, and it kind of gave a visual for what a ticketed event could potentially be. Of course, a ticketed event, and I want to say the benefits, potentially we've talked about this, and I know you know me, and you know I have thought these things out, overthought these things out probably, with regards to how our special events come together, not just for us, but for our outside organizers to make sure they're safe and accessible. So, one of the benefits of ticketed events is that it would be a source of revenue for our event organizers. Car Week events are expensive to put on. Sponsorships are challenging. Having a good backer is important. I recognize that. I mean, again, working with the Friedmans for a number of years, that was something that they were always working on. I've noodled this over as a potential method and heard this discussed as a potential method for crowd control. If there's only a certain number of tickets that are given out, then the logic goes that only a certain number of people are going to be coming to town. I don't really know, without testing it out, how true that would be based on what we saw during the pandemic, which is we had no events and everybody was here. And also I want to point out that when we talk about crowds at this point, besides, traffic impacts and parking and, potentially reinstating the shuttle system that we had pre-pandemic, the issues that we've mostly been experiencing and what I heard from the public and as part of our surveys in October was around the events themselves so much as the evening shenanigans from the people coming to see the exotics and the noise impacts in the evening when we're all trying to sleep, and what are we doing for those things rather than downtown is terrible during the day, what are we going to do? It's always going to be trafficy, it's always going to be parking challenged, that's us on a good day. So but I'm open to, potentially that is a method for crowd control. Potential downsides to this, and I worry about this, is depending on the layout, and there's all different ways to lay out what a ticketed event. The Friedmans is one example. I included the proposal from Mr. Levette, Mr. Kreitman, just for a sense of the ways that this could go in your packet. I worry that it could limit access to our core downtown, the restaurants, the retail shops, to ticket holders only, which may limit some sales. I know that we've heard from retailers that this is their, Christmas time for people that are with car aficionados but bored as heck, and now they're going to go into one of our kitchen shops, or they're going to do a little wine tasting with their friends while, their car friends are geeking out over cars. And I worry that it will make it more challenging for the residents and workers who are in that downtown area to get to work, to get to and from home, more difficult than it already is now. If their home, their workplace is now an event venue. Because I think that's important to remember, is that while our village can support events, and we do it well, it's not an event venue, it's a working place where we live and exist and eat our lunch and walk around and get exercise and do all of these things. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. For open events, looking at some of the benefits is, I mentioned earlier, it allows anybody to participate in these events, to get a glimpse of Car Week, to see the artwork that is some of the cars, regardless of your income, regardless of, I know it's a benefit for residents who are interested, and I've heard that from some people. I wouldn't, be able to afford to go to this, but I'm so glad that your city has this because I can get to see these extraordinary cars. It allows for easier access to downtown, without having to stop at a checkpoint to go in, depending again how you set up, and parking is always going to be a bugaboo for us. and the downtown residents and workers won't have to jump through extra hoops. And I've heard different ideas about, I talked about this with the Freedmans, different color wristbands for whoever you are so that Czech people know. And then it's how do you get, for shift workers, I work a 3-hour shift at this one place on these staggered days, and does a wristband, it's worrisome that it could be put on the workers like that. So downside potentially is, again, going back to the idea of, is this a truly good mechanism for limiting the number of attendees and people in our village? And are we seeing crowds increasing, that is of concern, and we are looking at mechanisms to limit the number of people coming to our events in town. And I don't think that's something that I have heard from feedback from the last few years of Car Week. Again, the concerns seem to center around the exotics and the YouTubers coming into the village, and how we mitigate the impacts of what they are doing here in our village. So, I'm looking for, and we had some questions, from members of the public, and I think I've answered most of them with regards to crowd sizes and, what's the point of this. And again, the big point is direction from council so that I can work better with our event organizers, so they know what the expectations are for a Car Week event. This is something that's not necessarily addressed in the special events section of the municipal code. You've all heard me talk about policy updates to policy C-1601, which is the special events policy, which I've been slowly chipping away at and kind of morphing so that it's mostly about Car Week, because this is when we need a special policy, is to dictate what's happening during Car Week, because it's such a unique time for us in the year. So this will help inform my changes to that policy when I can bring that forward to all of you. So the options here for discussion are to direct staff to not allow ticketed events on public property during Car Week. And again, this is just germane to Car Week, not throughout the rest of the year. Though you could tell me no ticketed events at any time of the year, and to include that direction in future policy updates. Tell me to allow the event organizers or anybody who comes forward during Car Week, if they can execute a ticketed event safely, all of those things that meet our special event criteria, that they can move forward with a ticketed event on public property. And then again, when we talk about ticketed events, and I'll return to Concours on the Avenue, it was so large. Perhaps an interim solution to this would be a scaled version. Maybe we have a size limit on a ticketed event for Car Week as a potential other option that I wanted to put out there, because again, knowing that there is expense out there for event organizers during Car Week, and that those events are challenging to organize, we want to be able to try to balance those needs if possible. So that's a further option, and I'm happy to answer any questions about Car Week and all of the overthinking I've been doing about ticketed events and event organizers. And I know Mr. Kreitman's here if you have any questions specific to his event. I didn't speak to it directly because this is just about ticketing in general, and something that I'm hoping that council can provide me with direction on.
Thank you, Ashley. Are there any questions, Ashley, at this time from both council members? All right, well, why don't we open it up then for public comment now? Richard Kreitman.
Mayor, council, Chip, and community. Just addressing, first I'd like to thank Ashley for getting this on the agenda now, because your judgment on this will determine whether we proceed with the project, the event that we proposed, or just drop it at this point. And Ashley, as always, has been delightful to work with, and she provides excellent feedback and advice. As a resident and a business owner, I wouldn't want to see any closed ticketed event taking over the streets of Carmel during Car Week or any other time, unless it's a nonprofit event whose proceeds go to the benefit of our community, to our legitimate local nonprofits and charities. I think the same standard should even apply to unticketed, free events that take up the public right-of-way. We shouldn't put up with the inconvenience of such events unless it benefits our community, and it shouldn't be for the profit private profit of anyone. So what we're calling the Concourse by the Sea that we're proposing for Tuesday, same footprint as CODA, same time frame as CODA, will be run as a fundraising event. We have agreement now to run it under the 501c umbrella of the Carmel Chamber Foundation, and it'll be run by an all-volunteer team of local and regional residents. And preliminary agreement, 25% of whatever net proceeds we can generate would stay with the Chamber Foundation to distribute the way to their local, they are pass-through to local nonprofits. 70% we're proposing would go to the local and Monterey County charities as designated by the individual volunteers, prorated based on their total hours worked. So, for example, numbers we're looking at, and I'll give you some bare bones on that, you could net easily, the net could be $50 an hour on, for example. So a volunteer put in 10 hours a week for the 40 weeks leading up to the event, and we'll need probably at least a dozen working as part of this thing. They would have $20,000 to donate to the charity or charities of their choice, and I believe that may help us get some very hardworking and qualified volunteers. Bare bones for the event, we were bare bones financing. It won't, I have the invoices from Mr. Friedman from the COTA for previous years, and couldn't cost, I don't think it can cost us more than $500,000 to put on a great event. We were proposing selling 5,000 tickets at $250 a piece, plus, so that's $12 million and a quarter. Another conservative $250,000 of the entrant fees from the car owners, plus any other sponsorships we can get. So that's looking at $1 million net. Probably have to leave some in the bank for next year's activities, just to have a fund. We'd also saying we'll provide at least 500 free tickets to residents of Carmel-by-the-Sea who want to attend, and that's a practice I'd also recommend for any other ticketed event like ours, as long as there's no food or drink supplied. So the free tickets, okay. I'm not here to really defend our proposal, but I did want to say that as proposed, the footprint of the code is 19 sections. There's 10 sections of street on Ocean Avenue, and then you have the 8 north and south on Dolores, San Carlos, Lincoln, and Mission.
Richard, I'm flexing my rules a little bit. I'll allow you a little bit more time than normal because you are a bit of an applicant here.
Anyway,
but
the sidewalks in intersections will be free for business people, for other people in town. It would only be just as that food and wine event on Dolores that's been held several times. The events in the street, the sidewalks, the free, the intersections of the 4 intersections on Ocean Avenue would be open. And the people who are not in the event, who haven't paid for the event, they'd be able to see the cars from the sidewalk. So it's not, they'd have the view of the cars, and probably better view than the last 2 events, the COTAs, where Doug Friedman, may he rest in peace, he hired someone to count the crowd, and I heard that the estimate was between 15 and 20,000 people were in Carmel on the day of the last COTA in 2021. So going with 5,000, the people in the event would be able to get close to the cars, speak to the car owners. That's what they want. The car people want to get close and talk. Other than that, it will be a quiet day in town. Because the event will, not just in the evenings, the days in town during car week have gotten pretty hectic. This would probably quiet it down. So anyway, that's what we're planning, and there's more details if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, is there anybody else in the public wishing to speak? Anybody in the room here? Zoom world?
Nancy, go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you very much and appreciate the work in progress here on this effort. But on behalf of the Carmel Residents Association Board, we do not recommend further consideration at today's City Council meeting based upon the lack of details and planning time available in between now and August of this calendar year. We believe that this is a rushed effort at this stage. CRA recommends compiling specifics for our community, residents and businesses to fully understand the proposed ticketed car week logistics, stakeholders, and financial components critical for possible future years' consideration. So it's just the short time in between now and August. We do not believe there's enough time to appropriately vet and prepare for this calendar year's car week. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Anybody else wishing to speak?
There are no hands raised.
Good. All right, bring it back to council. And Ashley, was there anything in summation you wanted to say in response to Richard's comments?
No, just that I appreciate any direction the council has. I know you know how complex Car Week is for all of us and the many feelings surrounding it, whether they're good or negative or in between. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And if this is something that you need more, as Ms. Toomey said, there's something you want to refer back to me, and I can come back and bring you more information and love to do more research. Okay. I'm happy to do that. But yes, whatever questions you have, I'm happy to answer.
I have a question. Mr. Kreitman talked about the sidewalks being open, but only the street centers being closed. Was that your understanding, or you talked a little bit earlier about people let's see, workers in shops having to get wristbands or whatever to get to their shops, and so it sounds like I'm guessing that was not your assumption.
Not with this event, no.
That the sidewalks would be open. So
the sidewalks for this one would be open, right, exactly. So
your wristband, so the thing about getting people to work is...
For this one, not applicable necessarily, but I guess I'm anticipating, because this was a topic of discussion with the Friedmans, and they were looking at doing a larger scale thing, and this is a different ticketing model. I guess I'm looking towards the future, especially since we don't have a new coda right now. So I'm trying to anticipate the future, I guess, is where I'm going with
when the Friedmans had talked to you, and I know this is basically new,
right. This is
when the Friedmans had talked to you about ticketing, your impression of that event was that the sidewalks would be closed.
The downtown would be closed to anyone that wouldn't have a ticket. So very similar, if you were around for 2021, to the way that the entrance points were for the COVID checks. It would be very, very similar to that. So that you would have to go through, regardless of who you were, whether you were a ticket, whether you were a resident, whether you're a business owner. And I guess that's my greatest concern, is I don't know that that's really the best fit for us downtown.
When the Friedmans had, so I'll talk about the COVID checks in a minute, but so when the Friedmans did those COVID checkpoints back in 2021, the businesses that had people that worked like on Ocean Avenue, those...
everyone was going through those I went through those checkpoints, and I work here in the village, and I'm staff, and I went through those checkpoints as well.
Okay.
I mean, again, you could have different color wristbands that you issue ahead of time. But the level of complexity, and I want to say too is, one, I'm looking at the Car Week events from the standpoint of somebody that is upholding our special events act on the municipal code. How are we doing these things safely? Working with the chief to make sure that, and the public works department, that things are noticed, all of those things. But also, and as Richard said, he and I have been meeting, fairly regularly, and I talk to our event organizers, looking at this from the standpoint of somebody who organizes events and the level of complexity that can quickly escalate, which makes these events seem good on paper in the beginning, but then it's kind of scary the day of. So I'm looking at it, I'm trying to look at it from both perspectives. If I was an event organizer, I'm trying to restrain support. Richard has gone through a lot of the questions I've had for him, and we've been going back and forth on these, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? Because I have every sympathy for our event organizers. These things are not easy, and I want to make sure that they have had those questions before we get to those events. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Well done. Okay, any other questions, comments, direction? Seems to me it's pretty obvious there isn't enough time to get this done this year, that's for sure. I mean, I do think that there's an awful lot of complexity that hasn't been answered yet, and questions that still remain unanswered. I'm not opposed to, maybe closing smaller streets, but close the whole downtown seems a bit of a stretch to me. My concern.
Yes, and I think the beauty of CODA was that it was a free and open event that the everyman could enjoy, and the casual visitor to Carmel. I mean, I worked at Carmel Bay Company through many of them, and there were people that would come in and say, "What's going on? This is our only time to see Carmel. It's our vacation," and they had no idea. And it does make downtown look a little different. My husband also showed his car, and the fees to be in it went up pretty quickly from the first few years. I think the last time it was about $250 for each person who was displaying a car. But I'm not in favor of a ticket event at this time.
All right, others? Ashley?
Sorry.
Alessandra.
Thank you, Mayor. I share your thoughts and Councilmember Ferlito's thoughts. Not only the complexity, but there's just something to be said about it being egalitarian, free, and open for everybody. And there are other very exclusive events that are very expensive to get into, and that's not really who we are as Carmel. And so I think, and the people I've heard from, unfortunately, they're not speaking here tonight, but they certainly seem to express the idea of keeping it just open for everyone and less of a exclusive, restricted type thing.
Jeff?
Thank you. I have a kind of a number of comments, some of which have sort of been alleviated by the notion that the sidewalks would be open. To Ashley's comment about the checkpoints, when the Freedmans had that event in 2021, we came up here at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or at some point sort of after lunch, and the checkpoints were really porous. I mean, at that point, there were lots of people wandering around without a wristband. We sort of showed our cards, but it was things were really nebulous. And my concern about sort of the tickets, we talked, you talked a little bit about the Carmel Art Festival and the vintners. My concern is that the visitors for an event like this are not the people that are coming to have a glass of wine in Devendorf Park, for the Carmel Art Association. And I think that security, when we start talking about ticketed events on public property, and that's real security. That's not Carmel Art Association security. When we have 20,000 people in town, that was your number, Richard's number. When we have 20,000 people in town trying to get in to see an event, and we're going to be checking wristbands, even if they're only one color, someone's going to have to be responsible for kicking out the people that don't have wristbands. And that is my hair starts standing on end when we start doing that. And so my recommendation from that perspective is that I don't think, and I know you will agree with this, and that Chip will agree with this. I don't think we have the wherewithal to do that in this town. Like, we do not. And and if Mr. Kreitman is going to come with such an event, we need to have someone representing the town to work with Mr. Kreitman to do the security, and that's not you. And I'm not sure that that's Paul either. I don't think that that's where our police department's expertise really lies. So if we go down the road of sort of having this ticketed event, which certainly sounds like we're not going to, at least this year. That's what I would think. Also, a couple of other things. I'm sort of wary of someone coming in with a new event and taking up 19 blocks of town. We have events in town that are 2 or 3 or 4 blocks, and people start small. And I know that Mr. Freeman, started relatively small when he started, and grew to grew to 19 blocks over the course of the decade that he was running it, or, I would not at all be comfortable sort of issuing that permit. I don't know what our law says about issuing permits or how exactly that works, but I would not at all be comfortable with a new organization coming in and tying up 19 blocks of town and bringing in 300 cars on one of the busiest days of the peninsula. So that also makes my hair stand up quite a bit. So crowd control, marketing, and finally, when we talked about crowd control, the other thing is, if we're going to have if we were, and it certainly sounds like we're not, but if we were going to have a ticketed event of this size in downtown Carmel, and we were going to basically close Carmel, or there needs to be a significant marketing effort so that people that are coming to town understand before they get to town that no, they're going to be a little disappointed if they can't walk down the middle of the streets and see the cars. So we certainly don't want sort of the crowd control aspect. We certainly don't want 20,000 people coming to town and having them be disappointed, that they don't have a ticket, they can't get a ticket, and whatever that is. So I think that there are a lot of moving parts to this that I'm not sure that we're really ready to handle yet. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Hey, well.
Bobby.
Yeah, well, I'm not opposed to ticketed events at all. I very much enjoy the vintners. I very much enjoy the art show. But I think for this particular week, I think our residents just need a break. They need as less cumbersome things in their way as possible to get around this town. And so for that reason, I wouldn't support a ticketed event during the week of the car shows, because it's just, I think it's hard enough on our residents. And that would just be one more street that they couldn't get down or drive down or whatever. I very much appreciate Richard's willingness to step up and put something on. I know how important it is. But I just, on behalf of the residents, I can't support this idea of ticketing, a ticketed event that week.
All right, I think we're pretty clear on message here. We love the event. We just don't want it to be taking over the town. We don't want to have a paid event. I think we realize that the public resources are valuable. I agree with you also that we don't have the capabilities and staff to go ahead and put an event like this ourselves. That noted, I don't think we need any more discussion. Do we need a formal motion?
Unless there's any opposition to the contrary, we won't be supporting a ticketed event this year.
Yeah, so I don't think we need a formal motion.
No, sir.
Okay, well, we've got adequate direction and comments, so.
Yes, sir.
Right, why don't we move on then to receive a presentation regarding the Scout House options and provide direction to staff. Bob?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'd like to present a brief history of the Scout House, what are some of the challenges for renovation, and introduce 5 options to go forward. Obviously, each of these options have advantages and disadvantages. Uh-oh. There we go. Start off with the history. Master builder M.J. Murphy constructed the Scout House in 1931. The city acquired the deed in 71. In the year 2000, a master plan was prepared and adopted, but those items were not implemented. In 2002, the resource was added to the historic inventory. The facility was closed in 2003, so that's 20 years now. In 2016, there were a couple of unsuccessful attempts to meet the ADA requirements. In 2020, we replaced the roof. And in 2021 and then 2022, it was listed as a council strategic priority to explore opportunities for the Scout House. And in fact, it moved up in priority from 21 up in 22. Last year, we issued a request for proposal for a contractor to renovate the building as well as subsequently provide activities programming, operations and maintenance, all at no cost to the city. In June of last year, council adopted 2 resolutions. The first was to authorize issuance of that RFP and also to approve an operations and maintenance agreement and a site lease. And the second resolution was to declare the Scout House real property exempt surplus land. Unfortunately, in July last year, we received no proposals. So to this day, the facility continues to be closed
and we still have ongoing operating expenses and maintenance. There's some major renovations that are necessary both inside and outside. Just wanted to hit some of the highlights. For the interior, we need an ADA path of travel throughout the building, or at least for the assembly areas, and that most likely would require an elevator. The downstairs ceiling height is not habitable space. It could be used for storage, but to make it habitable space, you'd have to raise the height of the building, and that's a big, expensive problem that could trigger seismic requirements. The entire electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems need to be gutted and replaced, and may need fire sprinklers. We have hazardous materials, particularly lead, and need new restrooms and appliances and so forth. On the exterior, at the existing site, it needs some siding repairs and painting. There's a lot of repairs needed along Mission Street, especially the stairs, the railings, the retaining walls leaning, the sidewalk, as well as water and sewer laterals need to be repaired. The driveway needs to be renovated. Some landscaping and irrigation. Now, it's challenging to make all these site improvements on a small, compact, sloping site. In addition to the renovation components, there's a number of codes and regulations we have to adhere to as well. So we need to renovate, meeting all the building codes, including the ADA. We need to meet the historic preservation ordinance. It's zoned in the residential limited commercial zoning zone. We have to abide by the Surplus Lands Act, or the SLA. We have to abide by CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And of course, it is a public building, so we still have to follow state and city public contracting ordinances. So here's an overview of the different options. Now, the 5 options listed in the report and presented tonight are in random order. Someone asked, was like, is that our priority? No, it's not. It's just a random ordering. So the first one we'll talk about is renovating it as a capital improvement project. The second is to sell the property outright. Third is to reissue the RFP. Fourth is to relocate and then renovate. And the fifth is to maintain the status quo. Each option that we're going to look at, we'll look at the impacts for the Surplus Lands Act, CEQA environmental review requirements, and each, as I mentioned earlier, each option has advantages and disadvantages. Now, most of these options have subsequent options. For example, we could relocate the structure and then reissue the RFP for a contractor to come in and renovate and operate the facility. So tonight we're seeking council direction to try to, if we can, to narrow down to 1 or say 2 options for further evaluation. Staff will come back to council at a later date to for specific implementation strategies once we have a preferred option. So we're not quite there yet. We're trying to narrow it down tonight if possible. Moving on to option 1 is to renovate this building as a capital improvement project. In this scenario, the city renovates it as a project. We meet the building codes, the historic preservation requirements, and all the desired needs of the community. This previously was considered in the capital improvement program for funding, but it was not funded. This was a few years ago. A subsequent option is that once we renovate it, we could lease it to a third party to do activities, programming, and maintenance, similar to what we do at Forest Theater. Or we could sell it at that point at a higher value than the deteriorated condition that it is today. Some of the benefits is that the Surplus Lands Act is not triggered by this scenario, and for CEQA it would be categorically exempt. That's easy. Advantages is that the city maintains ownership and we meet the long-term community needs. The big disadvantage is the cost. We would have to pay the full bill, and it's upwards of $1 million. Option 2 is to sell the property as is to a private party. Now, we don't envision demolition of the whole building of a historic resource to be the case. It's possible, but the buyer certainly would have limited options. One thing they could do is to preserve the historic character of the exterior and renovate the interior for housing. It could be single or multi-use housing, or for other uses per the zoning ordinance. That may require a rezoning or general plan amendment or a use permit, depending on what the buyer wants to do with it. In this scenario, the Surplus Lands Act would be triggered, so we'd have to go through that disposition process. The CEQA review depends on what the buyer's intended use is. One scenario might be just an initial study and a mitigated negative declaration, or it could be a full-out environmental impact report. There are pros. The pros is that it generates revenue for the city, relieves the city of the liability of the building, and potentially this could be done in a shorter time frame than if the city were to renovate it ourselves. The cons is that we have to go through the land's disposition process. We'll probably get reduced value for the as-is condition of the building. And the CEQA review is not known until we have a buyer, and potentially has no further public benefit. It could be, individual housing. Option 3 is to reissue the RFP we did last year. So the contractor comes in, renovates it, does the programming, the operations, the maintenance, fully at their cost. They would pay, they have to pay fair market rent, but they could pay reduced rent because we would factor in the value of their improvements. They could fundraise or generate income consistent with the zoning. Now, unlike what we did in last year, we have another option here. We could contribute city funding for this. This would trigger the California public contracting requirements, such as paying prevailing wages. Not impossible, but we're probably looking at a higher overall project cost. This is, the Surplus Lands Act would not be triggered. That's a plus. It would be categorically exempt, most likely. The pros is that the city maintains ownership and meets the long-term community needs, and the renovation could be completed at no cost, like we tried to do last year, or at reduced cost if we do some kind of cost sharing with the developer. The cons is that we tried this last year and we got no proposals, and there's no guarantee if we reissue the RFP that we get any proposals the next go around, but we don't know. Option 4 is another scenario where we would relocate the structure to another site. And in fact, Mr. Kreitman and others went out to the site yesterday with a contractor who gave us a nod that it's feasible to relocate the structure. So we were looking at relocating it to the southwest corner of the Sunset Center parking lot. If we were to do this kind of scenario, we could sell the vacated lot, and the proceeds for the sale of the lot could be used for the cost of relocation and the renovation. It would also be easier to renovate the building at a new site, a flat site like Sunset Center parking lot, versus the existing site, because there's more room, there's more access, there's more space to renovate it. It'd be easier to meet the ADA requirements potentially. Subsequently, if it's relocated, or once it's relocated and we sell the vacant site, we could then renovate the building ourselves as a capital project. We could sell the building at the new location. We could reissue the RFP. There's a lot of flexibility once we relocate it. It's like a part of a new project. In terms of the Surplus Lands Act, this would be triggered because we'd be selling the existing site. CEQA depends on the new site impacts and the approach to renovate. So on the one end, it could be an initial study, mitigated neg deck. Or if we change the historic character of the facility, let's say we only were to relocate and renovate half the building, or the upper half of the building, or the east half of the building, whatever, that could probably trigger an EIR for historic reasons alone. There's also, well, I'll go on to pros. The biggest advantage of this option 4 is that there's a lot of flexibility once we relocate it. To apply the most subsequent options. We'd also have the land sale revenue, most likely reduced renovation cost itself after you relocate it. The city will still maintain ownership. We can still meet the community needs for the long term. Some of the cons there's still a lot of unknowns here. There's still the risk of relocating a 100-year structure, even though it can be. Are we going to lose the fireplace? Is there going to be damage? There's impacts to the new site. For example, are we losing parking or lost housing opportunities? And there's certainly upfront capital costs for the city. The last option is the status quo. Keep the building as it is, continue essential maintenance only, and of course we can come back at any later date and revisit this. There's no impacts of the Surplus Lands Act, nor CEQA. There's no capital investment needed at this time. It all sounds good, except there's no beneficial use, continued liability, continued maintenance, and it's just an albatross if we maintain the status quo. So with that, the recommendation is to receive this presentation, and we really welcome comments from the public. And we're asking council to tentatively select one or two of these options for further evaluation. And the staff intends to come back to council at a later date with more details once we have a preferred option and how we can go forward from there. That's all I got. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Bob. We did receive a letter from Mr. Hertline, who lives in the Valley. I saw him on the Zoom earlier, so Mr. Hertline, the council did receive your letter. And then Mr. Barron had asked Mr. Swanson to prepare a little analysis about development options and opportunities for the parcel, and that was sent to you late this afternoon, 3-ish, I think. So there's a copy of that at the dais for you as well. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
I've got a couple questions, Bob. Sure. You mentioned you met with a house mover within the past couple of days. Is it too early to get a price quote?
He said preliminarily, can't hold him to it. He used the term at least $300,000.
And then I've got a couple questions. Would that involve taking apart the flagstone fireplace and chimney, because that's the most striking feature?
It sounded like that would be relocating the fireplace might have to be done stone by stone, brick by brick, and that would be probably at an additional cost.
Okay.
It's too soon to tell any kind of true cost at this point.
And the hardwood floor in the main room is the other most striking feature.
It sounded like that can be saved and relocated.
Okay.
Which would be a goal, certainly.
You may not know this, but do you know roughly how long it would take for him to put together a formal quote with the costs?
Well, I think what we would recommend, if council selects option 4, right, relocation, is come back. It appears that it might be a better approach to prepare bid documents for a contractor to do the whole renovation, A to Z, because at the old site we have to do some initial demo of the building. The house mover moves the building. We have to finish demolishing the existing site, and then we can sell it. Then we need the contractor to renovate the building at the new site. So I don't think we want to be the general contractor as a city and farm out a whole bunch of different subcontracts. So was the question like how long would it take?
Yes, and then I have another follow-up question.
I think we would need to prepare, the environmental is probably the long lead time item, and the Surplus Lands Act. So the plans and specifications required would probably be done sooner than going through the environmental process.
Okay, and then would you build a new foundation if it was moved to the Sunset Center parking lot? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Cox, Joan Cox, who helped us with the State Lands Act the last time we reviewed this, is also on the line. So if you've got questions specific to that issue, she will be available to answer them.
Thanks, Chip.
Any other questions to Bob? Thank you, Bob. Stay tuned. Open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak this? Oh. Richard? 3-minute limitation.
So, I want to thank Mayor and Community Richard Kramer. I want to thank two people, Mayor McLeod, who brought this option up to us twice in meeting. Originally, it was Olaf Dahlstrom, I believe, I don't know how many decades ago, made the recommendation that you could probably move the Scout House best. So I want to thank Mayor McLeod. I hope she's on the call tonight. I also want to thank Public Works, and particularly Cleve Waters, who's kept the building alive for 21 years. And yeah, the chimney replaced, I mean the roof replaced. He loves the building and he takes care of it. And so it is in good shape. The building is solid. The basement, which we're not going to keep if we move it, is dry. The main hall is in excellent condition. It's the woodwork could use a little TLC, but that's nothing a couple of Eagle projects couldn't fix up. We met with Charlie Scott of Scott Heavy Movers. I recommend if you're interested in this project, just look up Scott Heavy Movers and see some of the things they have moved. The Scout House is really a small project for them. And Karen, a couple of trees are going to have to go, I'm sorry. But the project should. Some quick numbers, well, 300K to move, maybe 500, 750K to refurbish it, really do a great job of refurbishing it and putting it down in the new location. A private sale of the lot, so I got local realtors, 1.5 to 1.75 million if it was sold as a building site for a single family home, but I doubt that's what you are going to want to do. So, and it needs, there'll be some of the water credits from the city's inventory are either going to have to go to the old site or to the new site. The building will have 2 bathrooms and a kitchen, and that's what it has now. This is up to you, but you know, if we put on a duplex, a triplex, Danny Levette said he could put a 4-plex on that, and he's done it. Depending on what you specify and how many of those units have to be under market, that'll change the price of the lot and how much money. I mean, we should have change in your pockets, in the city's pockets, of several $100,000 after selling the lot and redoing the building. And ADA access no longer is an issue. Mr. Scott came up with a way of doing minimum trees being lost. I was recommending, I didn't realize we'd be discussing it to this detail. I think the city, well, either general contractor, given the level of occupation, how busy the city staff is, I would recommend hiring a project manager for this, a consulting project manager. Again, the funds from, it's a self-funding project. So.
Richard, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Does anybody else wish to speak tonight? Anybody in Zoom land wishing to speak?
There's no hands raised on Zoom.
Alrighty. Get back to council then.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, I said Dale, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
I couldn't get up fast enough.
Sorry, you've been
Sorry.
quick enough.
I've been sitting a long time. I don't even know what to say. 4 years ago, I sent in a document today that's probably too long to read, but 4 years ago, I made a talk to the council the day that you gave $80,000 to do another design. There were already 3 designs by some talented architects. And I put a team together. I was going to put $1 million into it. I built 5 houses in this town in less than 9 years. They're all high quality. I had an incredible team put together. I called up and said, all right, I'm ready to go. What do we do? And next thing I know, I got a 20-plus page liability agreement. No one would sign. No one. My contractors, my architect, me, all of us redlined it. Not big red lines, just minor things. And Ashley and Bob, who I didn't know at the time, had coffee with me and said, sorry, we're not going to negotiate. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. So I said, you're kidding, right? You're kidding. And they said, no, we're not kidding. We're not going to negotiate. I said, well, nobody on our team and me are not going to sign this document. So if you're serious, we're out. They said, all right, you're out. And I just looked at them and I said, there's going to come a day when you're going to be begging people like me to do projects like this, and I'll give you one more chance. And they said, nope, that's it. And I said, okay. And we're friends now, and we're doing lots of good things together, and I appreciate that. But to do anything with anyone, they're going to have to sign that document, apparently, and no one's going to do it. So I'm glad I only invested like a week in it. And by the way, I met with all the architects. I had a 2-inch stack, and I turned it over to the Boy Scouts when later the city seemed excited about working with them. So I turned all that over, and I was willing to work with them, and then nothing happened, and here we are 4 years later. So the whole thing is really sad. I love the building, but I'm not going to do it again. I hate to say this because I love the building, but if somehow they made it historic after they had closed it, I mean, it's like just the worst possible series of events. They closed it, and then they made it historic, which took away all their options. It's just crazy how that happened. But I would say if you can get rid of the historic nature of it, get rid of it and sell it. Get as much money as you can for it. All the projects you're talking about are just never going to happen. I think we just need to admit it. And it's going to, if we moved it, we're going to move it onto a plot of land that's highly valuable and probably has much better uses. Anyway, I like Kreitman, and he and I have discussed this a lot, and it's just all very sad, but I think we should sell it. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Does anybody else wish to speak today? Last call.
Hans Buder. I actually live a couple blocks from the Scout House. I just think it's interesting that there's so much discussion about the physical asset, and it started as right for Boy Scouts, and with 3 kids 3 and under, I think there is a cool opportunity in this town to have more options for younger kids, and I'd just love to see some of the energy and creativity focused in that direction. And so I know that we did, there was a RFP for a contractor, somebody who could come in and, maybe lease it to groups or whatnot. And I guess that touches on it to some extent, but I'd almost want to know what could you actually do, with the property before you get too far down the road on, we're going to jack it up and move it across the street, or we're going to invest $1 million in it. And so, just as somebody, I've lived here for 7 years, and obviously this has a very long history, but, that's just as somebody in the audience, I'd love to hear more about, what could we actually do, with the property, especially, the historic, the original intent of the property was focused on kids, and, what kind of creative ideas do we have about that, or groups we could partner with, or, a vision for that, I think would be interesting, so.
Thank you for your time. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Last call. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period. Bring it back to council.
I have a question.
Yes.
The city owns property. One of the things we talked about during the housing element was leaving properties off of the list of sites. The city does own property at the street pass-throughs that are not connected to Unipro. So behind Sunset Center at least 9th, between Mission and 9th, and then between Mission and Unipro and 9th Avenue, which doesn't go through. And then on the other side of Unipro, between Unipro and Torres, like 9th and 10th, I think there are 2 pass-throughs that aren't built. Could those sites conceivably be used for, could part of one of those pass-throughs, and I know we have a couple of other sort of various parcels in town, are those possible alternatives other than just like unceremoniously plonking it down in the parking lot of Sunset Center, which seems unceremonious?
Sure. Yeah, with your direction, absolutely. Now, what you remember, and Mr. Swanson will correct me when I'm invariably wrong, but those are street right-of-ways. They're 50-foot wide right-of-ways, I believe. And we did not include them as opportunity sites for housing. We kept them in our hip pocket in case HCD said the sites that we identified were not viable. So, yeah, I mean, those are, we could certainly look at that.
But I just have a question. But for the Scout House, wouldn't it have to be residential in those areas?
Yeah, it's R1, right?
So that means you'd have to make the Scout House residential.
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I'll go down. I'll give my comments first if that's.
Go ahead.
If that's all right. Going down the list of options, option 1, renovate is CIP project. I think we've talked about that a lot. I'd be surprised if there's any appetite there. I certainly don't really have an appetite for that. And I'd be surprised if the council has an appetite, but I'll let everybody speak for themselves. Option 2, sell the property. I'll come back to that in a minute. Option 3, issue RFP. I personally don't have an appetite to do that. We tried that. We tried one RFP with the Flanders Mansion a number of years ago, and we went around and around about that for ever and ever and ever and got nowhere. And then we tried this one, you know, trying to conform to state law and a whole bunch of other laws, and went round and around and around and got nowhere. And so that seems like a dead end to me. But option 4, relocate and renovate, it seems to me like there's a possibility there. You know, Councilmember Richards, to use Councilmember Richards as a foil, talked about relocating it to the R1 district. Well, we talk, you know, in sort of the land of historic property, you know, we talk about adaptive reuse all the time. You know, and this is, you know, relocating it. So relocating it to one of those other properties may perhaps necessitate it being an R1, necessitate it being used as a residential property. To me, that's a good example of adaptive reuse. You know, we're seeing, you know, in fact, we're seeing that with the First Murphy House, which we talked about yesterday. It's a complete example of adaptive reuse because that's now no longer a house. It's a visitor center and whatnot. So to me, relocating it to one of those other parcels where it would actually, you know, especially if my memory serves right, behind the Sunset Center in on that sort of bucolic section of Mission, it would just fit right in. You know, here's a historic house in the middle of if I recall, a bunch of other historic houses on that section of Mission, and it could be made to. Not only could it be made to fit into the fabric of that neighborhood over there, but would sort of establish a precedent of, you know, perhaps using the rest of that pass-through for other housing solutions as well that we haven't talked about. You know, the city owns a lot of land, and while there's a path, at least over there, and I think there are some paths over on Unipro too. While there's a path, the cut-through path that I know a lot of people use could certainly be accommodated. You know, that could be accommodated as if the house were to be relocated behind Sunset Center, and that seems like a more appropriate. That to me seems like a much more appropriate use than just more sort of visual use or appropriate use than just sort of unceremoniously plonking it down in the middle of all those other historic buildings. You know, on the Sunset Center. Mr. Kreitman talked about selling the property. You know, I don't think the city is really in the business of selling property. Like I don't, you know, and if we decide that we're going to move it, if we decide that we're going to move this house to this other location and leave a blank piece of property there, you know, we have other blank pieces of property, the lot at the Sunset Center, Vista Lobos, and we don't talk about deaccessioning those pieces of property either. So I don't know why once we move the house, if we were to move the house off of that piece of property to some other location in town, I don't know why we would just sell the blank piece of property. I asked Brandon to put together the spreadsheet, of you know what the zoning would support, because I had a feeling that you know, to Mr. Kreitman's point, that the zoning would support, you know, without too much effort, the zoning would support 4 units there. You know, it is, you know, as we've seen, you know, through the course of the sort of encroachment issue up at the other end of the street, and then the intervening 2,000 square foot piece of property that has yet to be developed, and you know, however it is that you know, whether that's going to work. There's a lot of potential on that piece of property. And I think there's potential there for the city to go down the housing development route, which we will certainly go down with respect to Sunset Center or Vista Lobos or the current police station project, however that all works out, and get some housing built, you know, right near downtown in pretty much one of the most appropriate places in town. So those are my comments.
Okay, so I'd like to add on just a little bit there. In that, I think you brought a good point there, Jeff, with the housing possibilities for the city. Monterey has a bunch of housing that they actually do, where they go ahead and keep it in their inventory. They've kind of developed it themselves, returns to the housing market. It's a very, very good program, and that would be a good program to steal. It might work very well where you're thinking. We might also be able to do that on the other lots too. But I support the idea of moving the property, the house over to, you know, some other site. I mean, we did walk over to the Sunset Center. It's not going to be plopped down
Yeah,
willy-nilly. I mean, it does have some architectural compatibility with the other Murphy houses there. But I think it's a good way to go as far as constructive thoughts go.
Well, I would like to explore that option of moving it, and I don't necessarily think it's plunking it down in some willy-nilly place, because it's actually right next to the Girl Scout house. So that's where it would go. So they kind of would marry together, right? But I think it's interesting that we do have these pathways, these pathway lots. Why can't we sell those? If that's a revenue stream. But yeah, I would support moving forward with the possibility of moving the property and seeing what that would entail, and also maybe getting a rendering of what it would look like at that spot next to the Girl Scout house.
I'm intrigued by the thought of relocating and then taking the empty lot at that point and building maybe 4 affordable housing units there, which are right downtown, because it could be workforce housing,
Employee housing.
Employee housing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it could be really valuable. And I wonder, you got to think big and creative sometimes. And I wonder about an RFP that would lease that now vacant property for a number of years for a nominal fee if the person coming in to do this were going to build some affordable housing there, and part of the RFP would be move the house. That's a valuable piece of property where it is. So it might be attractive to somebody to do a package where they would be responsible for moving the house, but they would get such a good deal on leasing the land for a number of years that it might work out.
To be affordable, so that would be hard to cancel.
Well, there are people that do these things because they feel it's the right thing to do. But yeah, I'm intrigued by moving it before we just decide to sell it.
Joan has her hand up.
Okay. We'll go to Joan. All right, let's go ahead. Yeah.
Joan, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I just wanted to comment on that last conversation for possibility about leasing the property for housing. Under the Surplus Lands Act, if you lease it for less than 5 years, or if you undertake a lease that is not subject to renovation, it's exempt from the Surplus Lands Act. Otherwise, you would still have to go through the Surplus Lands Act in order and give notice of availability to the various housing agencies before you could undertake that process.
Not if we did it ourselves, though, if the city was the developer.
Not if the city were the developer, but
Exactly.
she had mentioned a long-term lease, which is why I wanted to make the comment.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Alessandra.
So my options, and all along I've been saying we should sell it because it's not going to cost us money to do that. I'm intrigued by the idea of moving it, but once again, we're talking about $1 million. We haven't spent $1 million to fix it up. Are we going to spend $1 million to move it? The only way it would make sense, as Richard Kreitman mentioned, would be to then sell the land that it was previously located at. If we moved it, I'm totally fine with putting it to with the other 2 Murphy cottages at the lot of Sunset Center, the south lot. But I just, realistically, now we're talking about a police station that's $30+ million. Are we, as a city, going to do this? I mean, we haven't all these years spent any money fixing it up. We've kind of just let it sit there. So I just realistically don't think we're going to put money in it, and that's why I think selling it would be the first option that I would take. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, I think one of the nice things about the idea of moving it. So if we go down your road and we talk about selling it, I think one of the nice things about moving it is if we were to move it to one of the pass-through lots, that land is less valuable. That land that the city owns is significantly less valuable than the land that the Scout House sits on now. So it would, my guess, perhaps we could just move it to one of those pieces of land, carve off a parcel, and then just sell the house and the land as it is, without doing anything, without sort of doing anything to it. There's no, and do you understand? Like it's sort of an arbitrage between a really expensive piece of property and a property that we could really utilize to do a lot of things with, and a piece of property that, as Bobby pointed out, is a single family piece of property. And we, obviously we can only do that with the pass-through. We couldn't really do that with the Sunset Center parking lot.
I see what you're saying, but it starts feeling very unrealistic that the city's going to put in the money for all of this. So I'm just saying that selling it is the quickest, easiest way, and I definitely would not recommend doing the RFP again, because
So it does sound to me that we have consensus around the fact that we want to go ahead and move it. We're feeling like most of the majority of the council here is saying, let's try to explore moving it further. So I think that is direction we can give that to staff now, from tonight's direction.
And we'll look at, we can look at multiple sites. We can look at the right-of-way, the 9th Avenue right-of-way, and we can look at the Sunset as well and come back to you with some options.
I think when I had, as sort of a precursor to the exercise that I asked Brandon to do, we sort of did the same thing with respect to, we didn't really do it, but we talked about doing the same thing with the right-of-way. Mm-hmm. So my question would be, if we move the Scout House to part of one of those right-of-ways, could we do something with the rest of the right-of-way as well? In terms of, like, can we either sell some piece of the right-of-way that the Scout House is then sitting on, and then develop the rest of the right-of-way, or keep the rest of the right-of-way in the city's inventory to do something with later? Like, how would that?
Sure, we can look at that with Ms. Cox. Again, the State Lands Act that's ripe for that, so we'll work on that. Absolutely. My only request is that I'll beg your patience, because again, we do have a lot of items on our plate right now. So this has been a good discussion, and I think we've got some good notes, and we'll eventually get back to you on this.
I think the one thing I'd like to make incorporate in that is a study of the Monterey model for their. Yeah. It's a very good program over there.
Yeah, it's great. And if you know Osio, I think Mayor Potter, when he was on the council in Monterey, if you know Osio Plaza, that's the model where Councilmember Ferlito, Barry Swenson Builders, the city of Monterey owns the land, and they went into a long-term lease through the State Lands Act, and Mr. Swenson built those affordable housing units, and he gleans the rent for those for a certain amount of time. But what Mayor's saying as well is that the city of Monterey does have a very robust housing program where, again, the units that they own stay in the inventory. So when people move out, kind of like the Habitat for Humanity model that Brandon and I recently were exposed to in Santa Cruz County.
Several years ago, I attended a conference of land trusts in Aspen, and while I was there, we were talking about paid parking, so I said, I'll go look at the paid parking they do there. But the general manager took me on a tour of Aspen. They were having terrible problems with not having their employees be able to afford to live there, and snow days, the employees would take off to go 30 miles away to pick up their kids and so on. So they took a piece of land and they built employee housing. They built some standalone houses, they built some apartments, and they built some townhouses. As long as you were an employee, you were allowed to live in those. And then if you were quit your job or whatever, but they stayed in employee housing. And it was very successful for Aspen because it kept their employees closer to where they were working. So I think we, maybe can be creative here with something before we just let it go.
Creative's our middle name. We will look at not endless options, but we'll look at these.
Okay, so I think we've got direction on this item too then. Let's move on then to the 15th item, which is sixth cycle draft housing element 2023, 2022 to 2031 response to HCD's comment letter. Marnie or Brandon, which one of you? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I just like to do a little introduction, Mr. Mayor, Council. as Nova's pulling up the presentation here, I think I just wanted to take a minute because Marnie's so humble to just recognize her and the staff for all the work that they've done on this so far. Has been no small feat between the city staff and the Housing Ad Hoc Committee and all the members of the community that have come out. So what we're here tonight to do is not a big lift for you. Hopefully it'll be pretty easy to get through. As you've already seen the housing element, we're here tonight to just let you know how we're responding to that state letter that we all saw. Should be pretty straightforward. We're not looking for any policy necessarily questions to be answered. We just want to cue you in on how we're addressing the state letter, which we hope to send off within the next couple of weeks. So with that, I'll let Marnie come up and work her magic, but thank you all for your time and for your support throughout this long project.
Thank you, Brandon. Marnie, our favorite warrior.
Well, good evening. So just really quickly, why are we here tonight? We have completed our first full draft of our housing element update that was submitted to the state on August 2nd. And as Brandon mentioned, we got a letter back from the State Department of Housing and Community Development on November 1st with some comments. So we've been working on addressing those comments, and this evening we wanted to update the council and the public on the revisions that are underway, discuss any policy level changes that have come out of the letter, and then just get any other feedback before we resubmit the document to the state. So if anyone is new joining us, this is an effort that is done every 8 years. So once we get certified, we'll be working on implementation, but we won't need to do this again for 8 years. And one of the major driving forces of the housing element is really planning for our share of the region's housing need. So as we're all familiar, Carmel's share this planning cycle is 349 new housing units. It's substantially higher than what it's been in the past. But I think we've risen to the challenge, and we've found existing properties where these new housing units can be accommodated without a dramatic change to the character of the community. So of those 349 units, 231 do need to be affordable to lower income households. And this often can be a challenge. So we have a number of programs in place to try to meet that challenge. And we've been working very closely with our Housing Ad Hoc Committee, Mayor Pro Tem Bobby Richards and Council Member Karen Ferlito. This has really been a huge team effort, also with our consulting partner, EMC Planning Group. So you may recall on November 13th, we had a special Housing Ad Hoc Committee meeting, and we wanted to connect again at that time on the mid-review revisions that we had submitted to the state. So we had an opportunity 45 days into the review of the document to meet with the state and try to address some of the early comments they had. That was very successful, we feel, in reducing the length of the letter that we ultimately got. So on November 13th, we talked about some mid-review revisions that were made. Those revisions were posted on our city's website, and if you're interested, we do have a reader's guide that summarizes those. We also, on November 13th, reviewed the letter that we received from HCD, and we presented the contents of the letter in 3 categories, which are housing types, housing sites, and then potential barriers to housing. So since that time, we've just been working diligently to address the comments in the letter. One of the comments, which is a really important topic of this 6th cycle housing element, is affirmatively furthering fair housing. So the bulk of the state's comments to us, they wanted more analysis. And so as you'll see as we kind of go through these slides, I'm going to be giving you a lot of information on how we're responding. These aren't policy questions for the council. They're simply more robust analyses that the state is requesting on our existing draft document. So included in responding to affirmatively furthering fair housing, the state's looking for more information on how we manage fair housing complaints, how we educate the community to filing those complaints, identifying historic patterns of integration and segregation, and then responding to the results of what we find in that analysis. And all of these things are then turned into housing programs to address any deficiencies. So no substantial change really in this area, just a more robust analysis on these topics. Regarding our regional housing need allocation, this is our proposal. This is the same proposal that you saw in the draft document. So we're proposing to meet our allocation of 349 units by establishing a minimum density of 33 dwelling units per acre for all new development. We estimate this could yield 302 units. We've projected 34 units in new accessory dwelling units over the next 8 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next slide, what we've done to date in that regard. We're also proposing to meet our RHNA by producing 31 housing units for hospitality employees. And this really is an incentive program for hotel owners to provide an employee housing unit on site in exchange for an additional hotel room. And so that's a policy that would be developed, and we'd be back in front of the council on the specifics. And then the last one is the transfer of development rights. We're projecting, 33 units. And so these are our goals over the next 8 years. I wanted to mention this no net loss provision. If we get halfway through our housing element cycle and the transfer of development rights program just isn't, catching on, there's not interest to do that, then we'll need to pivot and look at supplementing those 33 units or offsetting them with other sites. So just something to keep in mind. We'll be tracking this through the 8-year period, and we will be reporting back to the council on a regular basis. So the next item is pipeline projects. This was an area where we had a placeholder in the document. The 6th cycle actually started July 1st of 2023. So any housing units that have been permitted in the last 6 months of 2023 count towards our current RHNA. So we've included this information in the revised draft. We do have 17 new housing units which have been approved. We have 10 additional housing units that are currently under review. We've issued certificates of occupancy for 4 ADUs, and we have 13 additional ADUs that are currently actively under construction. We also have 5 ADUs that we issued building permits for, and this was all in the last 6 months of 2023. So in total, this is 49 units that will be attributed towards our RHNA, which takes us down to 300 as we really get into the planning period. We're also seeing a really strong interest in new ADUs. And as you can see there, I think that's 22 ADUs, and we're projecting 34 over the next 8 years. So there's no doubt in my mind that we'll well exceed that 34 number, and we'll have some additional housing units that maybe we didn't originally plan for. The Housing Priority Overlay District was something that we included in the draft housing element as a tool to really prioritize housing in the commercial districts. There was a court case recently that challenged the use of overlay zoning districts, and HCD is not really fond of them, I guess, right now. And so rather than trying to make it work by going back and forth and explaining what our vision is, we really felt like we could accomplish our goals just without the overlay. I think the nice thing about the overlay is that it consolidated all of the housing incentives and development regulations to encourage housing in one spot. we can certainly do those things through amendments to the zoning ordinance. So staff doesn't see, it doesn't seem to be detrimental to eliminate this. However, if the council does feel strongly about the overlay, we could certainly go back to the state and really try to work with them to understand, how we envision the overlay to work. So that is an option that we can discuss tonight. Regarding the policy level decisions, again, there were very few. One topic that did come up was eliminating our story pole policy. And this was sort of in the vein of streamlining housing development and removing any kind of just additional layers of process or cost. Staff feels pretty strongly that the story poles serve an important function in our community, being within the coastal zone, having significant, scenic views. We do think it's an important tool, and so we had recommended that it remain. However, if the council feels that that's something that they are comfortable letting go of, you can certainly give us that direction tonight, and we can eliminate it from the document before we resubmit. The other policy level topic that came up was rezoning commercial properties to R4, which is multifamily. We had committed from the very beginning that we felt we could accommodate our RENA without having to rezone or upzone, and we've achieved that. So we don't see a reason why at this point to reevaluate rezoning property. But it's certainly something we can explore again if the council would like us to do so. Some other modifications, there's some programs that have been added based on, our response to the state comments. Again, there are a number of state laws that just require that we do certain things that our housing or our zoning code address a variety of housing types. And so these programs will get us current with state law and define and establish regulations for these various housing types, like transitional and supportive housing, emergency shelters. A newer one is group housing, which includes farm workers. So there's a more robust analysis about farm worker housing in the housing element. So that's what those other modifications are. I just pulled out a couple. Regarding our timeline, so backing up from the April 15th date, so we talked before about December 15th was the deadline to get your housing element certified. We made a valiant effort and certainly tried to get it done by that date, but the state does provide us with a 120-day grace period, and that ends on April 15th. So we backed out our timeline and determined that in order to meet that deadline, we would need to post the revised document online on January 16th. The state does require a 7-day public review period before receiving our revised document. So the plan is to submit that document on the 24th of January. HCD has a 60-day review period, which will end on March 24th, which gives us enough time to come back before the council on April 2nd to adopt the housing element, resubmit it to the state in advance of that April 15th deadline. So that is our proposed timeline going forward. And that concludes my presentation. We just want to encourage the public to stay engaged and also just kind of thank our ad hoc committee as well as our consulting team at EMC for working really well as a team in getting us to this point. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to Marnie at this time before we go out to the public? Okay, Marnie, thank you. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight?
Evening again, Mayor and City Council members. Mark Stillwell, and a hotel owner in Carmel-by-the-Sea, and also in a former life I was the head of real estate for Pebble Beach Resorts, and I have some familiarity with affordable housing projects because I got entitled and built in Pebble Beach, a 24-unit affordable housing project for Pebble Beach employees. And it's been a wonderful success. And I encourage efforts like this. It's a very thorough staff report that Marnie and the team have put together. It's like deja vu for me, though. A few years back, I stood here when the council was talking about the conversion of apartments and condominiums to short-term rentals. And at that time, there was everybody in the world knew that you can't convert a home in Carmel to a short-term rental, but there was a loophole somewhere in the commercial zone that allowed it. And so I argued at the time that A, it's the wrong thing to do. I mean, there were tenants, long-term tenants, downtown core tenants who were getting displaced to turn their apartment rental into a short-term rental, and it just wasn't the right thing to do. So I tried to argue that, well, allow people, since it's allowed, put a 5-year cap on it, though. Let them amortize whatever, but then revert it back to short-term, to residential housing. And that didn't really fly, but I had 2 reasons. That was the primary reason, but the secondary was there's a cap on adding additional hotel rooms in Carmel. I own 2 hotels with 70 hotel rooms. I can't add a single hotel room to my property, at least without retiring one somewhere else. And I thought, well, how is this being allowed if there's a cap and you're allowing 40, 45 apartments and condos to be converted? I mean, they're rented by the night. They are hotel rooms, de facto. A Rose by any other name is still a Rose. Again, that didn't fly, and I think we all regret that decision today because you're trying to search and find units. With the stroke of a pen, if that decision could be amended or undone, no water needed, no construction, no financing, just do something and bring those residential units, condos and apartments back into residential housing and subject to the cap. It's a win-win. It gets you. I don't know how the state, in doing its assessment, how it treated those 40+ residential units that aren't residential units anymore. Would they give you credit? Do they know about them? Would they give you credit for bringing them back? Are there incentives you can do? So I just bring that up because it just, I think if we were here today and that was a debate, there's no way in heck that you guys would allow that to continue without some stopgap measures so you didn't lose them forever. So that's my 2 cents tonight. I appreciate the time.
Well said, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Hi, I'm Christy Ramers. I agree a lot with what he just said, that I wonder if that is possible if we take those short-term rentals back, if that would count towards some of the housing. But I'm also just standing up about the story poles, that I think they're really valuable, and I hope they don't go away, because it's the only way that we can see the height and dimension of a building, so hope they stay.
Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Zoom world?
Cindy, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. To tell you the truth, I did not intend to speak, but I think I hit something on my computer. But since I have the opportunity, I'll take advantage of it. I see you, Bobby, you're laughing at me. At any rate, I just wanted to echo what Christy Reimer said about story poles. They certainly do give a visual impact to those of us who want to look at what a project is. So that's my comment for tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy, appreciate it. Is there anybody else?
There's no other hands raised.
All right, bring it back to council then for discussion and direction. I'd agree on the story poles for sure. You know, honestly, they're the best way to go ahead and alert the neighborhood as to what's going on. So I don't see those getting rid of those at all. Who's the other one you want a direction on?
You could pull up slide number 9. That would probably, slide number 9 it was.
Rezoning commercial properties to R4. I see the need right now.
Well, for me, I would just, Marnie, again, you've done a fantastic job, and I think that the most important thing is to get this thing over the goal line, no matter what it takes. It would be extremely irresponsible for us to not get it across the goal line. We have to make it happen. I agree. I think the elimination of the story poles, I think it's really, really ticky-tacky of them to ask us to do that. That's, part of why we have the community that we have is for transparency and all of the other reasons. But as far as rezoning the commercial property to R4, could you maybe explain what that means a little bit more so it's really clear?
So in our commercial zones, our CC, SC, RC zones, they are commercial zoning districts, but they all allow residential, but they are commercial. And I think the state looks at those zoning districts and doesn't see the residential potential. So one of the things that was suggested is if we zone it to R4, which is a multifamily designation, it just provides some additional assurance that residential is going to happen there.
So would that have a great effect on us, on our community? Do you think it would have it would have a big impact on us if we changed that?
I mean, rezoning property is a big undertaking, and it's not something that we really contemplated doing as part of this process. So certainly if we find ourselves in a deficit and we don't have enough sites to meet our RHNA, we have to look for other avenues. But we have a plan that achieves our RHNA with a buffer, and so we just don't feel at this point that rezoning to R4, which essentially what that would do is basically eliminate any kind of mixed use building on those properties. It would be 100% residential.
So you're confident with what you've done without putting these in?
I am at this point, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Marnie, what about the ADU situation? I thought we were going to develop some design guidelines that made them so that they didn't have the kind of negative effect that I'm seeing going on around now.
So we do still have a program in the housing element to develop standard plans to help reduce the cost to homeowners, and that's...
I'm more worried about the impact that they're having aesthetically.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a great question, and actually the objective design standards, which is what you're talking about for ADUs specifically, are moving along with the ADU ordinance, so that those will be in place faster rather than being a program in the housing element. So the housing element has programs for incentivizing building ADUs because they help fulfill our RHNA requirements, but the ADU ordinance is what regulates ADUs, and as part of that ordinance is where we're going to stand up those objective design guidelines to minimize those visual impacts you're talking
quite a few
about.
Are sneaking through, it seems like.
What's that?
Quite a few are getting through.
Which is why
design.
We've got the ADU ordinance as a priority right now.
How's that doing?
Yeah, it's going well. We had a great workshop with the Planning Commission, so we're having some meetings in the next few weeks with HCD about our approach to make sure we're not going to run afoul of what they say, but we feel pretty confident in what we're doing right now.
All right.
Would you stay there? At what point do we require the story poles to go up? Is it at the very, very beginning, and then the story poles have to be adjusted if that plan doesn't get approved, and then they have to be up and down, up and down?
It's a great question. So we require story poles to go up 10 days before a public hearing. So they have to be up and certified before a public hearing.
But do they have to go up during the concept phase?
It depends on the route for the project. So if a project's going through a staff approval, which conceivably a lot of affordable housing would, then it goes up prior to that staff approval. There's not typically a concept hearing for a staff level approval. If something was going through the concept and final hearing phase at, like, say, the Planning Commission in a public meeting, they are required to be up before the concept hearing as well.
Do story poles go up for ADUs?
I don't believe we do story poles for ADUs right now, no.
I mean, I guess my comment on the story poles would be, in partial response to HCD was first, we don't require story poles for ADUs, so there's some section where we already do not require them, and I think it might be beneficial to point that out to them. And second, the story poles that we mostly think about here are story poles in the R1 district. I'm sure that's what 95% of us think about. And in that case, those are simply that's one house taking the place of a different house. So those story poles also don't have any effect on our housing inventory because we're simply replacing one house with another house. And I know that, perhaps HED it's hard to know really what they're worried about, but there are already these cases where they just don't even matter.
And I think you're hitting on something really important in some of these comments, these last comments that are sort of hanging out, talking about rezoning commercial properties to R4 or the story poles. It's kind of a signal that the state doesn't fully understand what's happening here. I mean, Marnie pointed out that we don't have to rezone to R4 because the way we have our zoning right now, we've already shown that we can meet all the numbers, so it's completely pointless. So we just need to point that out a little more clearly. So I think what you're saying, you've given us a couple more points to give to the state as to why it doesn't make sense to remove the requirement for story poles. So I guess I'm in a long way agreeing with you.
I would just add that I would be fine, maybe I'm the only one, would be fine taking some of the RCs or other Cs and rezoning them R4. If I would be okay with going through that process if that's what it takes to get us over the finish line.
Yeah. But everybody understands that you can build housing.
Yeah.
Okay. The underlying zoning, the
already
current
allows
that.
But if it's, I think, I was surprised at the. I don't want to say I was surprised at sort of the nature of the HCD letter, given what we've heard from other jurisdictions, and what a good job, Bobby and Karen and all of staff has done at getting us to the point where we only had like an 8-page letter, and we've seen other letters that are significantly longer than that. And even in those 8 pages, the number of things I think that were insurmountable are basically zero. And I think that's a huge accomplishment. And so kudos for that. And I would say, if it's RC to R4, that's the last thing. If it doesn't really matter, then there we are. I mean, if the effect on sort of the built-out environment of Carmel is really minimal, and that's the zoning change we have to do to get this over the finish line, then we're going to spend more time arguing about it.
I support what Jeff is saying. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident we can have the conversation with HCD because I feel like this is just a naming convention. I think this is semantics, honestly, R4 versus RC. I think they just don't understand that RC can do everything that an R4 can do.
Right.
But it can do, if you switch it to R4, you can actually have less options. You can't create multi-use buildings where you might be able to incentivize a developer to have a commercial operation on the bottom and build the same amount of housing on top. So I think we can explain that to them.
Good. Yeah. And the last thing I would like to say is I cannot commend Marnie enough for her work, especially with Catherine going out on leave. And Marnie, I don't know when you sleep, but you have really dedicated yourself to this, and I admire your devotion to it because it is more than just filling in the blanks. You are devoted to making this happen, and
I've seen emails at 12:15.
And I also have to thank my colleague Bobby, who came into this. I wasn't quite sure where we were going to go, but some of the creative things that you have come up with as far as in the hotel district. I think what our big job next is to get our objective design guidelines written ASAP so that we have those to work with, and then also to really start to outreach to the community about the opportunities downtown. The opportunities at the hotels to add a unit if they do an employee unit. I'm not sure that all of them understand that yet. And outreach to the property owners that have offices on the second stories, and if we could, really give them the message that we are going to help them with water when and if we have it, and so on. So our next job is a sell job of how do we get these done downtown. And
Alessandra.
Oh, please finish.
No, I'm finished.
Oh, okay. Just real quick, just to weigh in on it, I certainly wouldn't eliminate the story poles or do the rezoning. But Mr. Mayor, I share your concerns about these ADUs, and I'm actually getting alarmed at the size of them. Some of them, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of that is, well, actually two, that are really almost the size of a house. And we are basically, each one of these that is being added to our community, we're basically dismantling a century's worth of careful, thoughtful, deliberate planning, setbacks, zoning, design. I'm just very concerned with them. I don't know if it's even possible to do a moratorium until we get everything straightened out between this ADU ordinance and just having, see, this is what I mean about this loss of local control. I mean, these ADUs are turning into a second home, and then from what I understand, it's almost like a condo. You can sell it. And so, I mean, we're creating this whole, we're basically dismantling everything that we built in, 100 years of careful, deliberate planning to make this village look the way it does by these sort of things. I'm very alarmed by the ADUs, and I'm just really concerned at what's happening with the ones that have been approved.
I think you've got enough input, guys. Okay, good.
I just wanted to make a comment on the selling. That is up to the individual town whether they would allow it to be sold. That is not across the board.
Okay.
So we would probably never allow that. But we don't have much choice because the state has said ADUs have to be approved. So
That clarification, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Well done, guys.
Thank you.
7 o'clock.